everyone, I'm Prisha Agarwal, and welcome back to another episode. As high school and college students look to transition into finding jobs and working in the real world, a lot of the times they don't know where to start or who to ask for help. So today, we will debunk some of the mystery around getting your first break and how to maximize its benefits. My guest for today works with content strategy at Adobe. They are a commercial customer success associate at the company. Someone who is not afraid to speak their mind or chase their ambitions. Welcome, Nicole Walsworth. Thank you for coming on here and sharing a little about yourself.
Thank you for having me and for the introduction. I'm humbled.
Okay, so let's get right into it. I want to know, can you share a little bit about your journey so far, your professional journey, and how did you shape that journey? How did you shape your career so far?
Of course. So, as a little bit of context, I graduated from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in December of 2020 after 3 years and a quarter. When I first came to Cal Poly in 2017 as a freshman, I came in as a business major, but I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do with business. And my first exposure to that was through the Women in Business Association there. That's really where my professionalism, or at least like my professional journey, had its foundation laid, because they brought in all these speakers. They had programs set up for freshmen as well as like sophomore students to learn from these women that they brought in. They even got us on the corporate tours. And then of course, like through the curriculum at Cal Poly and like the introductions to each concentration, I figured, okay, marketing seems cool, let's try that. But after taking my first marketing class in my freshman year of college and doing a marketing internship my freshman year at a startup, I was like, wow, I don't like marketing. So had to pivot and decided, let's try information systems. And you know what? Let's try this little pro bono student consulting firm that I just learned about a week ago. And or a week before the interviews actually happened. It's like, oh, okay, cool, let's try that. And lo and behold, I became an associate consultant with them. And I really feel like that's where everything the trajectory just went off. Like that was my first experience of actually working with clients, like trying to have that like those buttoned up professionalism skills, learning how to present, learning how to back up like not arguments, but like your thoughts, points of views, and saying like, well, I think this might be the best path forward because of XYZ reasons, sort of touching on like using data or even like observation or research to back up like, this is why we make this recommendation. And also being able to just have confidence in myself to present and be able to talk to people that I felt like, you know what, I'm in the room with people who have been in industry for probably half the time that I've been alive, like probably 10 plus years or more. They have so much more experience than I do, but they're entrusting this sophomore in college and then eventually junior, senior in college to give them recommendations on what they should do with their business. That's a lot. Like imposter syndrome to the max, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, I was able to use the projects that I worked on to take it to ServiceNow as a solution consulting intern, then to Adobe as a solution consulting intern. And even that leached out into other parts of my life, like being able to talk to people, sort of being able to walk into a room and like, instead of feeling like, oh my gosh, what if they're judging me? It's like, well, I'm going to try my best. I've done harder things before, sort of. Like I've done things that may be as hard as this before. Like, why not just approach it and see what happens? I feel like that's the perspective that really came with all of that. And it was a great experience. I think I contribute a lot of my professional growth to that organization as well as the one I mentioned before, Women in Business. But I think outside of those, like it just comes with personal ambition. Like how do you want to present yourself in the workplace that you're in or the people that you surround yourself with?
That sounds really intimidating, and that's like a perfect leeway into what I wanted to discuss with you about getting your first job or like first couple of jobs, because you're really new to the workforce. You're going to be starting, even if you have that technical knowledge, even if you have, you have all the things on the job description, every single mark checked. There's only so much that you can prepare for an actual role. You need that work experience. So Could you maybe go over some stories or some learnings about what happened those first couple of times and like give more exposure to how you get over that initial bump in the road?
Absolutely. I think the first place that I want to take it is really the first marketing internship that I ever had. Maybe even a little before that. My first job ever was a courtesy clerk at Safeway, and I was a minor, so I couldn't even be a cashier. Literally, the job was cleaning up after people, like putting back go backs, taking the carts from the parking lot, putting them elsewhere, like um, cleaning up the floors, bathrooms, everything. That was the most humbling job of my life. And the way that people treat like service workers in general, like really opened my eyes. And that was kind of a realization of like, okay, this is something I don't want to do again. But I will take this experience with me for the rest of my life because customer service is hard. Like I work in customer success now, but customer success, customer service, two totally different things. And then, of course, my next job after that was a marketing internship. I happened to get that opportunity because a friend that I had since like sophomore year, their dad was the founder of the company. And he was like, hey, I'm looking for some marketing interns. Would you like to join us? And this was still at the point where I'm like, I don't really know if I like marketing yet, but this could be a good step in. Learned that I didn't like it. And instead of being stuck in that point and saying, well, if I don't like marketing, I don't know what I want to do. I kind of took a moment to reflect like, okay, I may have not liked the job in general, but what did I not like about it? And that's sort of where I started off, like making a habit of doing a pros and cons list. Like I really liked these aspects of the job, but I didn't like these ones. And being able to put those other like cons to the side and look at the pros, that's where I started sort of matching up like, okay, I like being able to work with data. I like being able to, I can't even remember what was on the pros and cons list. I don't even know what's on my pros and cons list now because I'm quite happy with my job now. A little bit, yeah. Um, so I took that with me, and that's where I sort of got to Mustang Consulting of like, okay, I don't know exactly what projects are going to be there, but I feel like this could be another opportunity where I get to touch a bunch of different topics and really dive into maybe like a specialty or something. And I got exactly that, basically the 2 quarters worth of projects. And then I ended up landing that job at ServiceNow as a solution consulting intern. That was completely through LinkedIn. And the strategy for that was cast a wide net with as many applications as possible. I even had a whole spreadsheet. I think that year I applied to 40 different internships, got interviews for 3, and then an offer for 1. Like it's sort of my approach was I assume this is all a numbers game. Eventually one is going to hit. That's sort of how I've seen all of the opportunities that have come my way so far, even with like Mustang Consulting, like let's just apply and see, it doesn't hurt. Um, Again, in that job, I did enjoy the job more than marketing, but there were still things that I was like, well, I prefer these things over these things. And with that pros and cons list, I ended up going back and looking at jobs that I would like. I ended up falling back into solution consulting because at that point, I really wanted to work with Adobe as a company. I just like always have seen their values and the way that people spoke so highly about Adobe that when I saw that there was a similar opportunity available, I'm like, okay, well, since I have the exact same title, did nearly the same thing, might as well just apply and see what happens. I ended up spending summer of 2020 with them virtually. And then from that point on, that was big leagues, like looking for a full-time job, which is the totally scarier than an internship. At least an internship, you're there for 3 months, you're done. But full-time work, who knows how long you're going to be there. And it's obviously like tech world and hopping from job to job, the people have different opinions about it, but I'm dedicating a good amount of time to this company and these opportunities. I want to make sure it's right for me. So kind of took a similar approach, um, cast a wide net. I had more of an idea of what titles to look for and what to put in my resume, like what I wanted to do. And from that point, I was approached with this job of customer success associate, which I understand is so vague. Like I feel like people might watch this or see my title and be like, what does that mean? I wish I knew as well. It's basically I help customer success managers do their job. Like sending out scaled emails, or looking up data in Salesforce, or pulling reports, or creating email automations for internal stakeholders, which again, all vague, but I, it kind of ended up pulling in bits of marketing and bits of like other parts of jobs that I did before. And it worked out in the end. Like, I wasn't sure what to expect, but it ended up working out. And I can say 9 months into the job, pretty happy with my decision.
I'm getting like two things out of this is one is that you know what you want. At least like through this process, like you knew what you wanted and what you didn't want. Like that pros and cons list, I feel like it's very easy to kind of um like there's a lot of things right now that I'm seeing of like green and red flags. So you literally like you can apply that to jobs. Like sometimes the green flags look really green and they overshadow the red flags. And it's a big thing that you knew what you wanted. Like even in internships, I feel like there's a limited, like it's a temporary amount of time that you're working, but it's easy to kind of get caught up in what flow you're going, and it's like it's almost as if you're completely changing the direction of your life by like one decision, like you deciding to join consulting. That's completely changing. Like you were initially going down marketing sales, and then no, like consulting, because that's not as interesting to me. But I guess you also have that flexibility available
Mhm.
to you as a college student. So that's a very big benefit. Um, so do you have any off the top of your head? I know this, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have any interesting stories to tell about your first like jobs that really impacted you or really were that aha moment where you're like, no, this is not for me, or yes, this is for me?
One thing that comes to mind immediately, um, at ServiceNow, this was summer of 2019, so summer before the pandemic.
Mhm.
Most of my team was scattered across the United States, and it was me and one other intern that came into the Santa Clara office. And oftentimes, for most of the week, it would just be us two. Like, our mentor wouldn't be there, our manager wouldn't be there. I think our mentor was in like Central California, not Central California, but like closer to Sacramento. Our manager, he was in like Monterey area. And for those who aren't familiar with like how California is laid out, like that's probably hour plus drive with traffic for either of them, maybe even 2 hours in some cases. So the one thing that I didn't like about the job was like, I wouldn't want to be remote. Why would I ever want to be remote? I really like being in the office. And I've only been in the office for Adobe once just to get my badge, and I could not imagine being in an office now. Like, I like it as a remote worker. I get to go up and make coffee for myself whenever I want. It's not free, but like I get to do it when I want. I have my syrups, everything. If I want to take a break, go for a walk, I could take a break and go for a walk, thanks to flexibility with schedule. Um, I think it's just things like that that in hindsight, like, huh, I thought that wasn't what I wanted at the time,
Mhm.
and now it's exactly what I want. And I think that illustrates another good point. Like, or even with like the marketing example, like technically some of the things I'm doing now are more marketing related than what I was doing in that marketing internship. Yet enjoy it now. I didn't enjoy it then. Maybe it was because of subject, maybe it was just because like I had no idea what the products were. Both in this case were high tech. So maybe it's just a matter of now I know what it is. Um, but one thing you said that really kind of tickled me was saying that it seemed like I knew what I wanted. I can guarantee you now I still don't know what I want. Like, all of this really came as a matter of like trial and error and seeing like, did this work for me? Not really. Okay, let's see if we can get something better. Did that work for me? Okay, not really. Let's see if we could try to get something better. I'm definitely in a spot like I can guarantee I don't think a pure social media marketing job would have been for me. I was very confident that a job in accounting wouldn't have been for me. I was very certain that switching my major into biology or science or liberal arts, that wasn't for me. But I think within the space I've created for myself, like there's still a lot of ways that I can sort of like poke and prod and see like, okay, what other things can I try? And I think it's a matter of like sort of chasing it and seeing like, okay, that's interesting. I'm going to ask that person about it. And along with that, being able to sort of say, like, these are the things I don't like about where I'm currently at right now. How can I make it better for myself? And asking for that. I feel like, especially as women, or technically I identify as not non-binary. I prefer they them pronouns, but I've been for probably like 20 years of my life like identified as a woman, like, and still very much so seen as a woman. Um, I feel like we're at a disadvantage when it comes to that, like asking for what we want. We feel like we're being greedy, or we feel like, I like I should wait until it comes to me. But the thing about that perspective is that people, or manager, partner, friend, they won't know what you want until you vocalize it. They can assume like your manager can look at you and say like, I assume that Prisha wants a promotion. I just don't know when she wants it. Also, this other person over here is talking a lot more about how they want a promotion and they're more vocal about it. Squeaky wheel gets the oil. Yeah, squeaky wheel gets, sorry about that. Squeaky wheel gets the oil. Like, being vocal about what you want, asking for what you want, even if the answer is no, like at least they know that you want it.
Yeah, I feel like in your answers, you're kind of touching on a lot of things that I do want to cover. And there's so many times when I just want to be like, yes, this and this. Um, but I wanted to touch a little more on from the beginning, if we were to take this, like your journey. First of all, talking to people can be kind of intimidating when you're starting off, especially. I feel like a lot of people are afraid that it's going to be taken the wrong way, or, it's going to result in something that they don't want happening. So it's better to be quiet and just take what's given to you. And I
Mhm,
think this can be in multiple regards into like what you want. Like, let's say you want a promotion. If you want to maybe negotiate salary, if you want to talk about some benefits that you could get, multiple aspects. It sometimes I feel like, especially when you're starting off, you're too scared that it's going to go in the opposite direction and you won't have a say in what you're trying to do. So, what are your
mhm.
thoughts on that?
I think that a lot of that fear comes from a perspective that you have to be perfect and you have to like earn it, and it must be given to you versus asking for it. And that if you ask for it, I mean, like I said before, you seem like you're afraid you seem greedy. You're afraid that like, well, what if someone else deserves it more than I do and they say no? Like there's an embarrassment aspect to it too. And I think like it took me a long time to get over that. I'm still working on getting over that and being more vocal about what I want, because I've sort of come to that realization of like, okay, well, if I don't ask for it, how am I going to get it? Um, I think in actually breaking that, like breaking that habit of being afraid to ask for something, it honestly did take just like practicing, like in little things, whether that's with friends or with like classmates, even, or like a part of those clubs, like being like, hey, I really like what you're doing there. Do you mind if I see? Or at first I felt like I had to state my intention, which would be like, you already see how I'm rambling now. It would be like 2 minutes of me basically being like, this is what I want to do, and this is I want to get to this result. Like this is why I'm coming to you, and they'd be like, whoa, okay. So I had to figure out how to sort of condense it and be like, hey, I'm curious about XYZ. I know you have ABC experience. Can you tell me about it? And like, sure, the first couple of career fairs or coming up to speakers after like classes or like group club sessions, my hands would be shaking. I'd be a little sweaty. But after a while, you start to get used to it and realize, like, oh, okay, there's nothing to be afraid of. Like, it's okay if I ask questions like this. And, sometimes you do get an answer where it might be a little bit more harsh or a little bit more like they might snap a little, but it's not a you thing. It's definitely, it's on them, it's not on you. And at first I did take those instances personally, and I was like, whoa, what did I do to do that? Did I do something to offend them? But I eventually got to a point where I was like, oh, maybe they're just having a bad day. All right, I'll come back to that later. Or like, I won't talk to them right now. Like, it's fine. And it kind of like helped flex that muscle. And now in my current role, I've been able to sort of use that to my advantage and ask like different people on different teams, like, hey, what do you do? Or, hey, do you know about this? And that in the end ends up impacting my team and makes us better. So it ends up being the skill that like that if you're able to build it now, like it'll only help you in the future.
Yeah, it's worth it in the long run. And definitely, like, I would even think that by you stating what you want, I think like that shows something about your personality as well to companies, and they like that. And let's say that's not something that's preferred by the company, that is who you are. And if that's not what they like, is maybe the work culture doesn't fit with what you need, you know? So maybe that's a
Exactly.
red flag. Maybe that's a sign.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh, that actually makes
yeah.
me think of one other thing. I think it was from actually a professor at Cal Poly. She mentioned that even if like if you try to negotiate your salary, or this is one example, but like if you attempt to negotiate your salary, not only does it show like person would like more money, person knows their worth, like they did a little bit of research about the job. It also shows your manager, it shows HR, like whoever you're talking to, that like this person is willing to ask for what they want, and they're more assertive of themselves, which is a green flag for employers. So even better.
Yeah. What are your, I know you touched a little bit upon this, but what are your thoughts on imposter syndrome?
I mean, even coming into this interview, like I saw the other people that you've interviewed, and I'm like, I am barely a year into my career. Am I even able to talk to to Prisha? Like, why does Prisha want to talk to me? Um, but now, see, now I know. It's like, oh, never mind. This is a good conversation. Like, I had no reason to be afraid or like wary of like that, like,
I'm
you know,
glad. I'm glad
right?
about that.
And that's just like one tiny example. Like, and when it came to imposter syndrome in like school and even in this role, honestly, like I feel like I had more imposter syndrome in like school than I actually do now in my job, just because of the confidence I've been able to build from those experiences and the privilege I had to be a part of those experiences too. Like, for instance, with the Mustang Consulting example, I honestly didn't know really what consulting was. I went to an info session. I heard that they did a lot of different projects. I'm like, I know that's what I want. I just have no idea what it's going to look like. I've never done a case study before. I've interviewed a couple of times before, but it has never been like intensive. Like I interviewed for the Safeway job and I kind of interviewed for the marketing internship. It was more of like, do you know what marketing is? Yeah. All right, cool. Well, let's go. And so I'd never really been through the ringer like that before, and I was so nervous about it. I'm like, all these other people look like they know what they're doing, like they know what consulting is. They want to be a part of like either tech consulting or like MBB consulting. Like they probably deserve this a lot more than someone who just walked in. It's like I want to work on different projects, but like at the end of the day, they saw the want that I wanted to work on different projects. I wanted to be a part of a team. I was here for the experience, not necessarily because I wanted to be a part of consulting. In fact, this was my first step into figuring out if that's what I wanted. And they saw that drive and they're like, you know what? Yeah, come along. I was like, okay, cool. And then a year later, ended up being selected as the managing director, and that in itself was terrifying as well, because it's like, okay, I've never led something. Like all 12 of these people are now looking at me like, what are we going to do? Especially when the pandemic hit. Like they looked at me like, are we going to have clients? What are we going to do? Like, are we still going to meet every Sunday? Like what's the plan here going forward? And I'm like, I had a moment of like, I don't know if I can handle that. Like what if it crashes and burn in my hands and all of the alumni are really mad at me? I don't know what I'd do about that. But I kind of put that to the side. I'm like, you know what? If everyone is in it, if everyone wants to try, like there's no way that this will fail. And even if that's like blind optimism in a sense, like it ended up working out. I asked everyone, do you still want to do this? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, here's our client, go for it. And we did it. Ended up being a successful quarter, as weird as it was. But I mean, like looking back on it, I kind of think to myself, like, you should have spent a lot less time doubting yourself and just going for it.
Yeah. I mean, I keep going back to the time that you were talking about, like being in a room full of like executives and them listening to your advice. Like in times like those, especially with COVID and, like crisis situations, like where do you find that belief in yourself? Like, did you have some sort of like support system or like, for me, I guess like mentors really help. They kind of like help me reassure myself or I don't know, but I just want to know like, where do you get that belief from? Like, how are you able to be so sure that what advice you're giving them, especially when it's something like consulting, like is legit and you're able to give them something that they, as people who've been in the workforce for so long, haven't been able to find?
That's a great question. Well, I'll start off by saying like I had horrible self-esteem coming into college. Like if you asked a friend, like any of my friends from high school, like what was Nicole like before college, they would have been like not who they are now. Like no, the Nicole now and the Nicole pre-college totally different. And like I had a lot of issues with trusting my own instincts, trusting my own judgment, and like sort of I often would go to other people to be like, is this okay? Like, is this all right? And I think especially for professionalism, like they had such, what's the word? There's a structure to professionalism and almost like a formula to it that it was sort of easy to learn. And I think through this consulting experience, like the case studies they had us do, the exercises we did, just like not actual physical exercises, but like almost like mental exercises, like problem solving. And like with only one other engagement under my belt in terms of like one particular, like really gut wrenching experience I had, or not experience, but like gut wrenching presentation I had with one executive, because majority of it was on me as an associate. Um, Even though I only had like one engagement, I'm like, you know what? The worst that could happen is that I stumble over my words. I need to take a break. I get a drink of water and I just continue. But I know my stuff. I've been working on this for 10 weeks. Like me and the lead who I was working on it with, like we know it works. We know this is what they want because we've been checking in with them. Like I'm just going to go ahead and present this and get their opinion and it'll be a conversation. And it also helps, as a side note, like to get into this consulting organization, you had to do a case study with a group and like they basically tore us to shreds there. And it's like, okay, well, if that, I doubt like any sort of client would be like that. So like what could go wrong? Like
Yeah,
if it's like that, the
I've
worst
seen
has already
worse.
happened. I've
Yeah.
literally, I've seen worse. And I honestly, like, even though they tore me apart in that like little experiment before this other like engagement started, even from that experience, I was like, I mean, it was bad, but like I actually feel pretty good about that. Whoa, like that built a lot of my confidence. And I was like,
Mhm.
well, now it could only go up, hopefully. Like
Yeah.
who knows what could happen. I feel like I barely answered your question. I think it honestly came to like I eventually learned to just trust in myself, like build my self-esteem that way. And I think like getting ingrained in professionalism was like a good first step into that, because professionalism, like there's a structure to it. Like there's a way that you talk, there's a way that you dress, there is a way that you conduct yourself in front of others that it's almost easy to follow. And I feel like developing myself in that way professionally helped me develop myself personally. I feel like it's still an ongoing thing. Like I still deal with like self-esteem, self-confidence now, but I'm in like a lot better place than I was way before then. And I credit that. I know I mainly talk about Mustang Consulting, but I also credit that to like my time in women in business too. Like I when I talked about the two back in college, like I almost described like women in business as like the aunt who would pinch her cheek and be like, "How are you doing, honey?" And Mustang Consulting as the uncles who's like, "So do you have a job yet? Do you have anything lined up for the summer?" Like it's two different types of support, but they're both there. They're both there, you
Yeah.
know?
Wow, I can't get over that analogy. It's so perfect.
Right?
You hit the nail